Hey everyone, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. We are going to be taking your questions tonight, but we're going to start with the topic of as it was in the days of Noah. Now, there's a lot to that topic, and we're going to kind of look at it rather broadly tonight instead of focusing on just one particular aspect. So there's the days of Noah, right? There's certainly the Nephilim aspect of that, but there's also the moral aspect. How are people living? And that really ties into this whole question of Mystery Babylon, which we've talked about in times past. I'll try not to go into my little diatribe on the woman that's riding the beast, but what we want to look at is where are we morally as a country, as a church, etc. The world. What is it looking like? And so these are some of the things we're going to kind of just use to get started, and then we hope that you will put some questions in the chat. They can be anything related to end times, except here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to talk about the vaccine. We're not going to talk about flat Earth. Let's see what else. We'll leave it there for now, okay? But we have the right to say no, but try to keep it related to like biblical prophecy, okay? So put your questions in the chat, and we look forward to getting into those. And of course, joining me in his illustrious studio in Alabama, my friend Scott Harwell. Hey, Scott, how are you?
It's high tech around here. I mean, I'm just rolling with the $20 headphones now for quite some time. and our brother John will be with us shortly, we hope. He actually does have a nice high tech studio and production thing, and I've got this. So anyway, good to see you again, my man.
You too. So let's start with this Matthew 24 thing, right? This is such an amazing passage. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. All right, so that is certainly giving us a lot to think about. There's John. Hey, John, welcome back.
Hello. Sorry.
Okay.
Audio browser problem. Always something.
Always something. Of course. Yes. So, yeah. And just before we get started here, I have to let you guys know, I'm just putting this in the chat. Corrupting Image Volume 3, it's coming out. I'm so excited. We're doing the formatting right now. That should be done before the end of this month. So I'm really excited about that. If you want to get it now, it's as cheap as it can possibly be, 99 cents on Amazon. If you want to wait, if you don't like Amazon, I understand. I will eventually have it as an ebook on my website, but it won't be cheaper than this. Okay, so if you want to grab that, go ahead. You can get a pre-order, and it will come to you as soon as it comes out. And we'll have the print version hopefully by the end of this month as well. But everything takes time, so check that out. I do appreciate it. So yeah. Anyway, kind of excited about that. And guys, so what do you think about the days of Noah? Where are we in the big scheme of things? Go ahead, Scott.
I don't see any Nephilim walking around yet, although a friend of mine on Facebook, very sweet lady, by the way, but I posted a little meme the other day. And this does tie into what we're talking about, but I posted just a little meme the other day, and it happened to have a picture of a globe about heaven and earth not passing away, quoting Jesus in Matthew 5. So anyway, my whole meme had nothing to do, but I wasn't even thinking when I posted it. But according to some believers, they're already amongst us, and we just don't know who they are yet, or some have speculations as to who they are. But I think it's going to be much more supernatural as far as when Jesus, takes off the reins and we see them released at the end of the age. So I don't think we're there quite yet, but we seem to be screaming toward the finish line. Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree. I don't think there's any Nephilim walking around in our midst. If they are, they're pretty well hidden. But
Well, where are they going to come from?
Well, it's the seed, John. It's the seed of the serpent, and there are, again, man. I go off. What does Michael Heiser call it? Christian Middle Earth. Okay, and he actually he does a show on this issue where he talks about Christian Middle Earth, and he will have on some really very unique people with some and discuss some very unique topics. And I mean, there's a lot of believers out there. God made us all kinds, and there's some that believe that there's reptilians walking amongst us. There's some that believe that the entire, you said we're not going to talk about flat earth, and we're not going to talk about it, but their theory behind it, I think a lot of their concern is that there's been this big deception, and that when the aliens manifest, or when the sons of God, that we know them, what they are, they're interdimensional beings, but when they manifest, that the deception of the current cosmology that we are, that most of us, and again, I don't care, with a globe and a stretching out, expanding universe, that's not even possible for humans to be deceived if we actually lived in this dome thing. And I'm like, no, I can't agree. Even I said, look, I'm not going to argue about flat earth, but your rationale for why you're saying it's important is not important. If it gets to be the days of the sons of Noah and it gets supernatural and biblical down in here, it is not, or around in here, it is not going to matter whether or not the universe is ever expanding around a circular earth, or whether we're in a globe. People are going to freak out anyway. But anyway, they think that if we're in this enclosed system, that the deception would not be so hard. I don't agree with them, but that's their argument. I don't debate them.
So they're coming from the abyss. Is that where they're coming from?
From the bottomless pit, which they view as being under the earth. And again, where exactly is the abyss? I don't know.
No, I've not seen any signs for road signs.
It's a place I don't.
I will confess. I mean, I agree with you guys, but I also I know that one of the things that is characteristic of the end days is deception. And there are times when I think that Satan doesn't really need that much to push the world over the edge. I mean, as I look at things that are going on in terms of current events, it's like there's like 20 things a day at least that show that, I used to think this, it's going to have to be this big spectacular deception that's going to really fool everybody. And it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, not in the world we live in today. The world's pretty much already gone down that path. So I'm not discounting that it's going to happen. I'm just saying I don't think it's as necessary as it once was. I mean, I have said that, why does Satan need, fake spacecraft and everything in today's world to deceive people? Because, I mean, he's not even going to break a sweat at this point in deceiving people, because we're already largely self-deceived. But I do agree with you in principle, though.
And the bad thing, and the really bad thing about being deceived is you don't know. I mean, that's deception. That's just it. You're not willfully ignorant. You're not willfully not knowing something. You really I really believed that for years, I really believed that only the Jews were Israel. Okay. I never believed the pre-trib rapture part. But I always believed that only Judah was Israel. And then I was reading the same verses that I'm reading now, and it just leaps off the page, the distinctions between Judah and Israel. So again, I didn't know I was deceived. So, or else maybe I'm wrong now and I'm deceived again.
If we want to talk about that, we could probably go for a while. But
I'm just giving an example. I'm just giving an example of deception and that's where I do think, brothers, a type of show like this, and with people making comments and asking questions, it allows brothers to flesh things out. And not even saying that John's deceived or Doug's deceived or I'm deceived, but it allows us to bounce different ideas off rather than our echo chamber.
I'm not read through all of Heiser's stuff, so I'm not a Heiser expert. So does he tie a lot of this into the mounds and things that we see around the world? You know, these, like around here, we have this giant serpent mound. We have a couple of them and other mounds. And I know there's some theory that these are Nephilim mounds. And we have one not too far from our church where there's some strange stuff that goes on. I'll just say that. I mean, is that part of it?
I don't know where he would stand on that either. So I'm not able to.
Yeah, he doesn't really go down the ancient aliens path. I've read Supernatural, Reversing Hermon, and The Unseen Realm.
Well, I know Derek Gilbert has gone off on some fears with Mount Hermon and other places in Israel. There's a giant mound. I think a sort of a snake-looking mound up in the north of Israel near Mount Hermon. I think they all think it's connected.
Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, again, it's I think that a lot of what we see in the scriptures, in the older scriptures, and when I read Revelation, in other words, we believe these supernatural things happened. And I just think if we live through it, it's going to be like the most amazing time ever. I mean,
hey, we've got a question here. This is from Sweet Soul 74. What can we expect next, Doug? I think that may be a good question for John, because John is the expert on what is coming next.
More of the same, only quicker.
Okay.
No, I have my thing I use almost every week now that ACLU, acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And I think that ties into some of the stuff Doug talks about with the different views of Babylon. For example, if you think that we're near the end and a literal Babylon and Iraq has to be rebuilt, that's not going to happen overnight, unless it's going to be a virtual Babylon, which is possible. No, it's possible in today's day and age. I mean,
kind of in the metaverse, right? Maybe that.
Yeah,
that would be an interesting take. That
meta Babylon.
So, and I wasn't laughing like the fact, like making fun of your statement.
So I brought it up. What's the over under that it's in corrupting the image for now? What I just brought up.
The meta Babylon?
Yeah, meta Babylon. You're working on that one.
I'm working on it.
Just throwing it out there.
Thank you. I appreciate the tip there. All right.
So anyway, so what's next? I talk Sunday. I'm continually fascinated about these ecumenical Abrahamic houses of faith that are being built around the world. There's one in Berlin that's under construction. There's one in Dubai that'll open this year. Abrahamic House of Faith. There's one in Omaha, Nebraska. Actually along Hell Creek, if that's of any coincidence or not. And then I found this thing on the templemount.org website the other day about talking about redoing what's there on the Temple Mount to Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And then because it's an 8-sided building, having 8 wings coming out. And then each there's Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, there's Christian mysticism, there's Islamic mysticism, Sufism, and then there's Hinduism and Buddhism, which is, they say, sort of a mystic Hinduism. So it's just kind of interesting that all of these things are kind of happening now. Now, I don't know if anybody's planning this. I know there has been talk among some of the people who are involved with rebuilding the temple or something there on the Temple Mount that have talked about it being a house of prayer for all people. And that kind of fits into a lot of these different scenarios. But I think we've got some wars and stuff coming first. I think we're going to see continued economic problems and wars and the outgrowth of wars over the coming time, and a continual growth of locking down the world in sort of a tyrannical, centralized way. That's well underway, and I don't think that gets walked back without some. A friend of mine, I heard him say today that tyranny never goes backwards unless it's forced to, and I think that's correct. And I mean, just what's happening today with some of these tyrannical things that are coming out, in my view, tyrannical. Certainly, this is all part of it. It's there's too much happening at once to say what is the next thing.
Yeah, well said. There is a lot happening. Yeah, we never know. I mean, we can look at the tea leaves. We can say what is happening, but it's hard to say, what's happening. In fact, another question from Sweet Soul is, how much longer till the cup of iniquity is full? So, I think what John was saying, there's tons of stuff happening.
It's actually a garbage can.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think that we can really know that. I think we can speculate, right? I mean, we don't know until God says, okay, it's enough, right? We can look around and say, wow, things are really bad. We're seeing hints and shadows of kind of the days of Noah. We're seeing, Babylon and all these different places, and it seems to be getting stronger. But ultimately, we cannot say how much longer, right? That's a God question. So that's above our pay grade, really, to answer that.
I don't think we can yet. I don't think we've seen something definitely 100% like in other words, that we could all just say, yes, this is a biblical event, and we can almost start setting a particular, not a date, because we'll never know the day or the hour, but we can't even set, I don't think, a year yet. Now, if we are, in fact, if we are seeing this, and I'll take it back to something I learned from Halisa about how the ancient rabbis were writing about a worldwide plague that would be either 18 or 30 months. Rabbi so-and-so says 18, Rabbi so-and-so says 30. But anyway, they talked about an ancient plague that would go around the world, that would affect the world and start to bring the world, not necessarily to its knees, but have this tribulation. And the rabbis called it the footsteps of Messiah. But that there would be this worldwide plague prior to the final 7 years of this age. And again, they could be wrong. I know we had a nice little email exchange with our brother Gavin on Daniel's 70th week. I'm not dogmatic that we're not in it. I'm pretty sure we're not. But in other words, when I say Daniel's 70th week, I'm talking about the final 7 years of this age. I'm pretty sure we're not in it, but I would not stake my salvation that we're not in the final 7 years of this age. And this is just these are just the initial birth pangs that we're seeing. And I really do believe, y'all. I mean, I think that that what we're seeing, we said we're not going to talk about the not a V thing, but I do really think that this toxon, which is the Greek word for bow, and the rider has a crown, which is a Stephanos. You can help me with my Greek, Doug, and which would be the wreath. And you've got an organization. Fauci basically got grilled, and they've admitted pretty much they manufactured this thing, and now it's out in the world, whether intentionally or not. And it is, in a sense, I don't want to say conquering the world, but it's certainly taking down systems. It's destroying liberties. So I'm not dogmatic on it. But this very well, this rider on the white horse, Council on Foreign Relations logo, who founded the WHO, and their symbol's got a serpent on a pole, and we all know that these symbols mean things. And I'm just saying this could be the first seal. And the next one, to answer the question that John got asked, is after the first seal, you have the sword. And I'm hoping we're not in the first seal. I'm really hoping that because if it is 18 or 30 months, that means this and that is the first seal. That would mean this next year there may be the sword, which would be, generally speaking, it's war. It's an altar judgment from God that we see throughout Scripture, where His people are judged to bring repentance. A lot of times they didn't repent, but they got judged. And I believe that's a lot of His people are all mixed up in Babylon right now. That's why He says, "Come out of her, my people."
Yeah. So this is interesting because, we've talked about this before, but, my concern is that there's two concerns that I have. That there's going to be a lot of people running around saying this is that which is prophesied. And I think this is one of the things where you need multiple witnesses to confirm it, because I don't think it's going to be something that there's going to be one outlier out there that's figured it all out. So that's why I always encourage people. I mean, everybody's got their charts and graphs, and I do too. And they're subject to revision. So the one hand is you have different strains of thought in eschatology, and you have some people who are tempted to always be declaring this is that which was prophesied, with a desire, I think, sometimes to be first rather than right. They want to be the first person to bring it up. And I don't know, and the first one to declare this. And I think that's problematic because so far, I don't think any one of those has been proven to be true. On the other hand, too, there are different strains of thought. We refer a lot to our pre-trib brethren who think that there's a strain in pre-tribulationism where people they would call themselves consistent futurists, and that nothing has to be fulfilled before the rapture. Nothing will be fulfilled. It's from nothing will be fulfilled to the rapture to nothing. Now they sort of say, well, nothing has to be fulfilled before the rapture. But my concern too is that there are certain things that we know are going to happen. We've got the mark of the beast and all this stuff going on in the first part, and these horse judgments and that type of thing. But they're also saying, well, we'll be out of here before any of it happens. And I think that's as bad as being too quick to say, because what do you do when it actually does happen? I mean, and it could happen. I know people think, no, it'll never happen. We'll be out of here before it happens. We'll be out of here. And I hope they're right, but I'm not sure that that's the way it's going to be. So,
I'm not dogmatic on much, but on that, nobody's getting raptured out of here before the tribulation. There may be some protection in the wilderness. There may be, I'm looking at it from a Moedim standpoint, there may be some gathering of the wheat into the barn. There may be some supernatural type of protection. But this gathering, this catching up, that doesn't happen until Yom Teruah. Now we can talk about, like Nelson, that would be a good show to have one day, maybe talk, because he's got a pre-wrath view. So he believes that the church gets raptured, which I dislike that word. And then the final year is sort of when God is pouring out the trumpets and the bowls. In other words, he views the trumpets as part of the wrath that the church will not face. I see it now that my God, the God I worship, he was able to throw boulders from wherever he threw them from. And he was able to pinpoint and only killed, I forget which, the Amorites or whoever the Israelites were fighting on that time. And it mentions boulders in the end. And he can supernaturally protect his people from anything. He protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I don't know their Hebrew names, in a furnace. He protected Daniel in a lion's den. So I'm not the least bit concerned about anything that's coming from God. Now, if he allows war, or he allows a plague, or he allows famine, and that can catch up believers. Obviously, there's been John, you've had friends pass away. I'm not saying that's a judgment from God on them.
No, well, there's a verse I think it's in Isaiah
about the righteous get taken away, or taken.
Yeah,
taken
and then
home.
I'm always thinking, then I'm like, what's wrong with me? If the righteous are getting taken away, why am I still here?
Hey, God didn't let you do this for 20 years, not to let you watch the final 7-ish, 8-ish, 9-ish, 10 years of the show, man. So
this is a good segue, because Iris is asking in Matthew 24:40, the one taken is at the wicket.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Do you think that might be Yom Kippurim, perhaps?
So that's a controversy too. Is the one taken in judgment, right?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other one left. 2 women grinding the mill, one will be taken, the other one left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. So, I think the whole idea of watching is that's the whole idea of the thief in the night, right? And we're told specifically that we know the time of the season that he's coming back, so that day will not overtake us as a thief, right? So I think that's the same exact language that Jesus is using there in Matthew 24.
Pull up Peter's comment after Peter McIntyre.
Peter, okay.
Yeah, he says, after doing a study on the rapture and the day of the Lord both happen on the same day.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Where is...
Yeah,
the day of the Lord begins
after doing a study on the rapture. I'll just read it. And the day of the Lord both happen on the same day. And Peter, I would concur. I would not call it the rapture, but I would say that's when the resurrection and the gathering of the saints occurs on a future Yom Teruah, which begins the 1,000-year long day of the Lord. And the reason I say that is because when you go back into the prophets and you start seeing about that day is a day of darkness, that is a day of gloom. And then Isaiah also, that day is a day of no war. And that day, that's the same day, that 7th day. I just think the first part of that day, especially the first 15 days, Doug, we had this discussion, remember last week, where we're sitting here and we're talking about, we're kind of arguing about 15 days. Well, the same thing. I think it's going to be, in the final years of this age, there's going to be a lot of destruction of this earth. Some of it's going to be by man, perhaps by these in the days of Noah, whatever these things are. And then it is the earth at that time. I don't think it's going to be totally, destroyed and then recreated anew, but I believe that it's going to be severely shaken and rocked. And I believe that happens over that 15-day period or 10-day period prior to the Feast of Tabernacle. I mean, the symbology of of Sukkot or Feast of Tabernacles, when the wedding feast actually occurs. That's an interesting discussion. What happens in the 10 days between Yom Kippurim and what are those 5 days for? Is that the sheep and goats judgment? So
we've got another question from Muriel. Do we know what the sign of the Son of Man in heaven will be? Yeah, I'll take that one. Muriel, what I would suggest is that if you go back to Daniel chapter 7, you see the Son of Man coming on the clouds, right? So that is the sign, right? The Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven is the sign of the Son of Man. Okay, that I think it's right there, that we don't have to go too far. Daniel 7 is where we see the Son of Man coming on the clouds, and that is the sign. So I don't think there's any other sign. We're not going to see crosses in the sky or something like that. But
I've always thought too that would occur, that there would be a sign. Okay, that would be on Yom Teruah. Okay, and that's when the sign would appear. That's when there would be a resurrection. I believe that's when the 2 witnesses in Revelation are resurrected. I believe that's when people who haven't taken the mark go, whoa, because they're seeing the 2 witnesses, not only the 2 guys, the 2 literal guys that might have been laying in the streets of Jerusalem dead for 3.5 years, but they're seeing, all of a sudden, Tim LaHaye stuff, like, whoa, that type stuff. And then our brothers in Judah and our maybe individuals that thought they had faith or maybe didn't. And they're, wait a minute, I've got 10 days to repent. And then you go through that sheep and goats judgment on Yom Kippurim or Day of Atonements, where she was like, well, they're obviously there. I don't believe that those were people that made it to the first resurrection, but they're that surviving remnant of the nations that are going to celebrate Sukkot. that get into the kingdom, because as you did it, it'd be like the hiding place where they hid the Jewish people from the Nazis and others in Germany and occupied Europe that hid the Jews. I think it's going to be it might be very similar as this beast Hitler on steroids thing with much better technology is running around the world trying to kill people. So
we got a question from Joe Blackford, unless there was a comment. He says, context, how do you place the days of Noah in the timing context of Matthew 24, Revelation 9? Seems to be closer to the midpoint. That's years from now. Okay, well, I'll take a stab at that. So, yeah, Joel, I mean, I think when at least when I'm talking about the days of Noah, I don't think that we're there by any means, but I think that we're maybe getting close. Okay. So obviously the days of Noah were more than just the very last days, right? There was this run up to that point. And so when I start thinking about all the technology that is coming our direction, where they're actively putting neural links in the minds and the brains of chimps, I don't know, that's kind of a big deal in my opinion.
CRISPR. I mean, there's a lot of developments with CRISPR.
Right, CRISPR-Cas9.
Significant developments this week.
Exactly. Right. So part of it depends on what you think CRISPR-Cas9 or gene editing, if that has a part to do with the mark of the beast. Of course, I do. Right. I've well documented that in all my books.
That's why I teed that one up for you there, Doug.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Have you written a book about it?
Yeah, well, I've written a couple. Yeah, a couple. So, if you think the mark of the beast is a genetic thing, then we're getting really close. If you don't think that, then yeah, we're no related.
Doesn't matter.
Related.
So how long when Noah got the word from the Lord, you got to build the ark,
right?
Until the flood. How long was that?
Well, I thought
120 years, wasn't it?
That's the impression I got. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know that he built the ark that whole time, but it certainly took a while.
It took.
I don't know. I don't know if he had union labor problems.
I've never built an ark before. I mean, did he had Nephilim workers? I mean,
what's an ark? But and I'm only just saying is go back 120 years from today, and what's happened in the last 120 years in terms of technology development. 120 years ago, they weren't driving cars. They had horses, and people didn't go very far from wherever they were born. And now a lot of us, have been in a lot of different places in the world and almost all 50 states. And things have really dramatically changed in 120 years. So if maybe that's a picture, I don't know if that's a picture of the time frame or not, because I don't know when that 120 years ends,
Yeah, that's the trouble, right? But you could certainly say that, if we were to take an arbitrary date like World War II, right, 1939, I mean, wow, since that time, so much has changed. I mean, I don't know. So again, we don't know exactly what exactly. It's just that the days of Noah culminated in the flood, and we know why, because you had the sons of God coming, taking the daughters of men, and they created a race of Nephilim, right? That was the foundation of why this massive judgment. Look, there's only two gigantic judgments in the world. There was the flood, and there's going to be the second coming. Anything else is small potatoes. These are the two big ones, right? The first time the earth was baptized by water. The next time it's going to be baptized by fire. When Jesus comes back, he's coming back in flaming fire, right? So we got to see some similarities. So right, we think that we're at the end of the age. We start looking and say, okay, what's going on? And is there a correlation, a similarity to what was happening back in the days of Noah? Well, you had these beings that were mingling in a genetic way with women. Do we see something like that happening today? Well, yeah, we kind of do. And if we actually go out on a limb and we start looking at some of the alien abduction kinds of things and start understanding that is not, they're not foreign craft. They're not extraterrestrial. They're not from Alpha Centauri or wherever, but these are interdimensional beings, which is very well documented. Then we start to make a really strong case to say, oh, maybe we are.
Did you see what NASA did recently? They hired
theologians,
24 priests or theologians to help people to explain to mainly Christians, what happens if we end up with this alien life appearing.
Right.
And that's kind of it. I mean, why are they doing that? I mean, what do they know? And what do they really believe? So the other thing too is I'm thinking of this period of leading up to the flood. Listening to I think Ken Ham has done it, and some other people, that there was this you tweak fertility rates just a little bit before the flood and longer lives, and you get a world that might have had 10 or 20 billion people in it before the flood. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't a few nomadic tribes running around the Middle East that may have been destroyed in that flood. It could have been a significant number of cities and the whole thing. I mean, I think it's entirely possible, but but you compare that to what's happened. I mean, go back 120 years from now and see what has happened to the world's population growth. There's another parallel there, I think, too. So I think there's a lot of parallels with these days of Noah.
Well said. We have another question from Tim. He asks, where do each of you place Ezekiel 38-39 within premillennial eschatology? All right, Scott, you're up.
At the very end of this age and at the very end of the other. I think some of it is could very well be, or at least Revelation. I believe that Gog and Magog or Magog is definitely at the end. But some of that stuff just looks like it almost seems like it's two different things. So to me, but definitely at the end of this age, I think that's the and I'm getting some of this, and I certainly can't teach it the way Halisa did on this. But she talked about the rabbis had a similar view, by the way, without revelation, that there would be a Gog war prior to Messiah coming, and then there would be another war between Messiah and Gog at the end of the Sabbath day, or that seventh day.
Did they say the Sabbath day was 1,000 years?
I don't know that. I don't want to quote that, but I do know that in the Talmud it talks about that Messiah would come at the end of the fourth day, or 4,000 years. That then there would be a 2,000-year messianic age, and then there'd be a 1,000-year or seventh day rest. And yet, due to their sin, he didn't come. I mean, in other words, they were rejecting, obviously, Yeshua.
Sure.
That's in Sanhedrin 97 for those who want to look it up. It's an amazing passage, right? So they don't say the last day will be 1,000 years, but just look at their example. They're talking about 6,000 years, right? So as days, and then obviously the last one is you just have to fill in the blanks there. So where I see the Ezekiel 38-39, so what I did in Corrupting Image Volume 3 is that I was able to figure out what is the meaning of Gog, and I'll spill the beans here. It just means death or enmity. I found it in Sumerian, which was really interesting, and so death or enmity. Okay, well, we already know who that guy is. That's Satan. It's well documented in another book I wrote. But anyway, so that's Satan, right? And God even says, he says, are you not the one that I spoke of by the prophets all those years? And I was asking myself, I'm like, where was God talking about this guy Gog for all those years through all the prophets? And I, of course, couldn't find anywhere. But once I understood that it's Satan, I was like, oh, there you go. I mean, he's talking about him all the time. So understanding that this is death or enmity, right? Really, that's what the word means. Then, yes, he appears again at the end of the 1,000 years because Satan is let out of his prison. So he's going to have one final hurrah, right? He's going to, try to do his thing at the very end there. But I would really put the 99% of the interpretation of Ezekiel 38:39 square with the Battle of Armageddon. All right, it's the same exact battle, just told from two slightly different vantage points. But you see the similarities. You can't get around those similarities. A ginormous earthquake is going to be happening. You're going to have hail like you've never seen coming out from there. You're going to have the birds of the air are going to be invited down for a super big feast, right? Those are the same things that are happening in Revelation 19 and in the whole Armageddon scenario. So it's right there. It's on the mountains of Israel, right? That's where this is going to be taking place. And then they're going to be decimated. Gog and his armies are going to be decimated, as will the beast and his armies, right? They're coming to fight against God and his armies. And of course, they're going to ultimately fail. So they're exactly the same battle, but just told from two different vantage points. And, as you were suggesting there, Scott, what the rabbis have to say on that, totally agree with this. They thought that Gog was the ultimate end times bad guy who was going to rise up, and then he would be defeated by the Messiah. So that's exactly what we see in the book of Revelation concerning the Battle of Armageddon and the defeat of the Antichrist or the beast, whatever you want to call him. So that's where I would put that. John, do you have any perspective you want to share?
I've bounced around a lot. I think if you look at some of you can find them. You probably can't find them, so I have plausible deniability. But I used to think it was early in the last 7-year period. Now I think it's more part of the last scenario.
Hey, it's not a question, but Louise up here, she talks about, she was reading Genesis. She's going through Genesis. She looks like Noah was 500 years old when he started building the ark, and he turned 600 when the rain started. Yeah, that is one of what I believe that's another example of a typology of this 7-day plan or 6,000 year plan, that the fact that Noah was 600 when the first time the earth was destroyed is not a coincidence. And you get, just the other day I was reading through Genesis myself, and I think it was Isaac was 40 when he got married. His wife was barren for 20 years. She had the son when he was 60 years old. So you get all these types on that. And that's one reason I'm up to like 99.999% now that we ain't got much time. Unless our calendar is just completely wacky off and you go into conspiracy theory land of, and again, I only believe in the ones that are true. But if you start getting into it hasn't been about 1,990-ish years. It's only been 1,800 years since Jesus. Then everything that I'm talking about is obviously thrown out. But if our calendar is pretty correct, I just think we're just screaming toward it. And I'm not setting dates because I haven't seen anything definitive yet that you could go, okay, that's the abomination of desolation. That guy's calling fire down from heaven, and people are being required to take a mark. And I believe that's when, I think that's when we can really, really set dates. Now, our brother Gavin would disagree with us. He thinks there's going to be some major fulfillment on a future Feast of Trumpets that we'll know at that point in time. We're in the final 7 years. So
has started.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I believe something's going to happen on a Feast of Trumpets. I really do. I think all of the major prophetic events are going to happen on the Moedim. I can't sit here and say, oh, I've got it all figured out. And this, I'm not going to sit there and do charts and stuff because I'll probably change my mind next week and then I'd have to redo them.
Right.
So
we've got a question from Ninja 199. So was there tech like today, but in the days of Noah? So I brought up this picture here. This is the Antikythera mechanism. This is basically an old computer. The mechanism consists of a complex system of 30 wheels and plates with inscriptions relating to signs of the zodiac, months, etc. So, there's a lot of...
Where's that from?
It was found somewhere in the area of Greece, as far as I know. And, it's a very complex thing. Nobody quite knows how it works. But what it does show us is that they had a high level of sophistication. And, what could have happened before the flood, again, we can only speculate. We do not know what happened before the flood because we're just not told that in Scripture. But, we can certainly extrapolate the ingenuity of man if you have a very long lifespan, and consider that Adam and Eve were walking with God. I'm sure that scores you some points, right? And then you have the sons of God coming down and bringing the various technologies. Technology is just an understanding of how things work and saying, look, don't do it this way, do it this way, right? It's much faster and easier. So I think we could certainly say that they were sharing their secrets, and the book of Enoch talks and says that that's what they were doing, in fact. So, we don't know exactly what that tech was, but there had to be some pretty impressive technology. There's even some out of place artifacts that kind of make you go, right? And some people have suggested that, if you look at some of the hieroglyphics, maybe turn your head sideways and you can maybe see electricity being used. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I've looked at the pictures and I'm like, yeah, that makes you go, right? You wonder, is there something that we've missed? I think it's entirely
maybe that's
possible.
why they murmured in the wilderness, because they didn't have the Wi-Fi they had in Egypt.
Maybe.
Hey, Ruth's got a good question as far as what is the evidence that the tribulation is 7 years? Most verses refer to in a 3.5 year period. And she's talking about Daniel 7:25, 12:7, Revelation 12:13:5, i.e. is a 7 year period left over from pre-tribism. I would say calling the final 7 years of this age the tribulation period, yes. I believe a lot of us, if I still even use it, it's probably a carryover from that. I do believe there's a final 7 years of this age. I believe the Great Tribulation, the megathlipsis, is a 3.5 year period. When the beast has the authority to actually given authority over the entire world, I believe that period is 3.5 years. Now, our pre-trib brothers have stretched that out over the final 7 years based, I believe, solely on Daniel's 70th week and some really bad typology that they use. But as far as a 7 year period, Doug and I get it from the first half of it being when the two witnesses are testifying and they are / we maybe have the authority. It's not going to be business as usual. And then you've got the final 3.5 year period after the beast arises from the abyss and kills the two witnesses. And that's the Great Tribulation. The abomination triggers that. I think most people are actually in somewhat agreement on the triggering event is, what the abomination is. You probably get 100 different opinions.
Yeah, I believe that. I don't know that it starts that day, this period of Great Tribulation. I know that it's some time after that. I think we can all agree on that.
I think it's on the future, getting Gavin in here or Doug Krieger to do the math for us, but I think it's I think it's on the future, perhaps first fruits or Passover. He's going to. I believe the beast is going to mimic Jesus. Okay, I believe he's going to try to completely and say, and then, hey, John, you know this about Islam and their prophecy. It's a complete mirror. And maybe the false prophet is this guy claiming to be Jesus, for them type thing. I'm not really the Messiah. That guy is like a false Jesus claiming he's not the Messiah, but the other guy's the Messiah.
Well, it would make sense that Satan, and I mean, when you look at the history of Islam, assuming it's true, the satanic verses, that's what Salman Rushdie wrote about, because that's how Muhammad got the first part of the Quran was from what appeared to be genies or demons. But it would make sense that Satan would try to mimic and deceive people by downloading that to someone. So anyway, but I agree with you that's sometimes we want to poo-poo, and I think that may come from some prejudice and that type of thing, that, it's just Islam and those Arabs and everything. And I just think that that's a not so wise way to approach it.
So I think one way we can look at the question of, how long is that last period is essentially if we reverse engineer it, all right, so John, I won't speak for you. I know Scott and I are very much in agreement that Jesus returns at the time of the fall feast. Okay, I think we both agree, Scott, that it's at the time of,
I think Day of Atonement.
Okay, maybe for 15 days off. I think it's the Feast of Trumpets.
That would only
we can
be
haggle
10
over
days
that
off.
later.
That's only 10 days off.
Well, fair enough. So in any event, it's the fall feast. Okay, so 3 years and half a year before that would put us at the time of Passover, right? And I agree with you, Scott, that I believe that is when the Antichrist, the beast, is going to go into the temple, or whatever, some semblance of the temple, the holy place, and he's going to declare himself to be God. Now, it's interesting. It talks about him getting some kind of a head wound. We see that in Zechariah. We see it in other places as well, that he apparently is going to have some kind of a head wound. It's all in the new book as well. But so I think he's going to die, or quote unquote
appear to die.
Okay, appear to die. We'll see. We'll see. But I would not be surprised if his blood isn't spilled on some kind of an altar. All right, and then he resurrects.
How long later?
It's a version of resurrection. Okay.
Do you think it's 3.5 days?
I don't know. I wouldn't put money on that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, it's interesting because when I was going through Luke recently, I think I got this from Fruchtenbaum or somebody's research. That the sign of the prophet Jonah, there shall be no sign be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And we always think, well, Jesus being resurrected from the dead, there's the sign. But I think it was Fruchtenbaum says there's 3 signs of the prophet Jonah. Because there was Lazarus, and there was Jesus, and there's going to be the 2 witnesses. But it would make sense that maybe the Antichrist beast is going to try to mimic that.
It wouldn't surprise me. And so then if we then go from there and we keep reverse engineering, 3.5 years before that puts us where? It puts us at the Feast of Trumpets, or at least the fall feast, right? So maybe Gavin is onto something, right? It very well could be that something happens, whether there's some kind of an agreement. I know that the pre-trib folks like to say that there's going to be a peace agreement. Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
They're looking for an agreement, for instance, maybe after a war in which Israel is finally able to get power, and they're able to put in a system which allows them to restart the sacrifices. I mean, that's what they're all teaching.
Right. And then there may be something to that. Because we don't agree with pre-trib doesn't mean that all of the research is out.
Some people are dogmatic and says, we're the temple. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you. We are the temple, but it doesn't mean that the enemy would not use a temple. And so I'm not saying, but I don't think it's a prerequisite. In other words, I think that's a danger too. It wouldn't be like the enemy to cause 400 or 500 years of division and confusion and deception. And everybody's looking for this, and they're looking for it, and it never happens. And next thing you know, we're actually in the very end of this age. And some of us are screaming from the mountaintops, these signs are being fulfilled. And they're like, no, there's not a temple. Again, think about it. That's possible, guys. Back to the resurrection on this, a guy asked, we've done a show on this, but he talks about the 2 witnesses come in the first 3.5 years. They're killed and resurrected after 3.5 days, and the rest of us follow. That's about the only time I use the day for a year principle, because it talks about the 2 witnesses, and you've got the day for a year principle back when Ezekiel's told to lie on his one side for 40 days for the house of Judah and 390 days for the house of Israel. And that's a specific day for a year principle. And I just don't know of anywhere else in the Bible where 3.5 days is ever used. We talk about the 3 days and the 3 nights of Yeshua being the grave, but I don't know of anything. Whereas we do know there's quite a bit of biblical scripture that point to a 3.5 year period, a 1,260 days, of 42 months, a time times half a time, if that is 3.5 years. So I believe that what that is they're actually resurrected. That would be an example of a day for a year. And I don't do that with many verses, just it makes sense if they're resurrected at the same time that Yeshua, even if, like John said, what if Yeshua doesn't actually? I don't think he's going to set foot on the earth on Yom Teruah. I think he's coming in the clouds, and we're gathered to the clouds. We're gathered to that, if you would, that second realm, and that supernatural realm where heaven and earth meet and collide. And then I don't know if he actually sets foot back on the earth until after Feast of Tabernacles or Yom Kippurim, or in between Yom Kippurim, because it talks about he's coming back with his bride. And I don't think that maybe we're not fully married yet. Maybe he takes us up and then we come back with him. It's not a U-turn on my pre-trib friends. We're talking at least 10 to 15 to 22 days. Not a U-turn. They always like to use that as a proof text. What's he going to do? Rapture should come back? Well, he could, but I think that's what the fall feast are showing us, is this timeline that I think it gets rapid, like John likes to say, rapid, converging. And at the very end, just like so much prophecy was fulfilled in the last 7 days of the life of Jesus, that and then his resurrection. I mean, so much was fulfilled. And I think it's going to be the same way at the second coming. It's so much prophecy is going to be fulfilled in a very, very short window of time. We're packing a lot of verses into 3 Moedim, or technically there's 4 Sabbaths in the fall feast. There's the 8th great day. That we had that discussion last week, sort of. So
yeah, Joel Blackford has an interesting comment. If you observe natural birth, don't you see contractions coming in waves of pain? Why can't there be contractions prior to the final 7 years?
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, I think we would all agree with that, right? We're sort of in the Briggs Hickson. It's been a while since my wife had kids, but
when I had
Briggs, whatever those contractions.
When I had children, my contractions were not that bad. I mean, I thought it was like nothing.
Well,
there we go.
I had a kidney stone once, and it was pretty intense.
Yeah. But I think that analogy is absolutely right. And of course, so if the birth is Jesus coming back, then obviously there's going to be massive contractions. As we're really close to that, there's huge contractions. But then the further back in time we go, then there's just little blips, right? And I think we very well could be experiencing those. It's just, since we don't know the end point, we can only speculate on, was that a birth pang, or was that just kind of life as usual? I mean, I think they're birth pangs, but we can't prove those things. That's the only thing that I would suggest.
Somebody must have started late, because they are now saying, I disagree. They believe that the shape of the earth and the cosmology of the heavens is a big deal. Ma'am, I mean, look, I don't do the debates. I understand the deception part. I totally agree with you guys, but I don't think it matters when these interdimensional beings, I mean, the big deception, I pointed this out on Facebook recently, the big deception that Peter warns about, he doesn't mention anything about the shape of the earth. The 2 big deceptions were, at the end of this age, people would deny the flood. That happened starting in the 17 and 1800s with this principle by a lawyer. Sorry, John, me and you have to take the blame for that, who pretended to be a geologist. And he came up with this principle called uniformitarianism. Then we have Darwin and Darwinism and evolution. And so now you do have, the second warning was they would deny the creator. Those are the 2 biggest deceptions, everybody. Now how the sons of God, and I think it's the oldest lie in the book, that they're going to say to the humans, the promise is going to be, you can be as gods. In other words, I look at that. In other words, you can be immortal by following me. You can be just like us. You can be this powerful being, and it's not going to be this evil boogeyman, with a pitchfork. He's coming, I believe, as an angel of light, as a savior for the world. He's going to help mankind, and
Mm-hmm.
And that gets into Doug's motif, but I think it gets supernatural. You can become immortal. Now, whether there's technology used, obviously I believe there will be, but does there have to be? I don't know.
Well, it's like the Twilight Zone, How to Serve Human. And the aliens come and it looks like they're here to help us out. They've got this book, and all they can read is How to Serve Human, and everyone's pretty excited about this. But then somebody finally decodes it, and it turns out it's a cookbook, and by then it's too late. But they think that these aliens are coming to help us out, and I think that's the basic scenario: is that Satan and his crew will come in the guise of aliens or advanced beings who are coming to help humanity in the time of our greatest trial. And it looks like they're here to serve us, but actually they're here to eat us, basically.
Hey, question for, it's not directed to John, but I'm going to let him hit this one from S. Brown. I don't think I've ever noticed S. Brown in the chat before, but are we in the millennial reign, John? And if not, why not?
Are we in the millennial reign?
Yeah. Somebody asked the question. They may be new to this, listening to you or me or Doug or any of us.
What's the old saying that I've heard? It says Satan will be bound.
He's on a long leash.
Yeah, or he's either on a long leash or somebody keeps letting him go. So I just don't see any indication that we're in that millennial period. I'm sorry. I mean, I would love to be, but I just I know this is a big issue of controversy.
And for the life of me, I can't figure out why it is. I mean, Peter writes that he's a lion roaring around seeking who to devour. I mean, look at all the deception in the world.
It's a debate because the Catholic Church told us that this is how it is, right? After Augustine, you had this whole era of where the church has absolutely replaced in every aspect the Jews, except for the suffering. And so, and the church age became the millennial age. And so then they had to just basically write out the whole thing of a future millennium, a future time of good times. But this is it, That's why people are still stuck on that.
And speaking of carryover leaven, that would be an example of some carryover leaven in many of our Protestant denominations, where they have totally carried that view over, that we're already in the kingdom now. It's fully realized, we're going to conquer. And the danger here is the NAR movement, and that we're going to conquer. They're ripe for deception. And that's just one of the doctrines. It doesn't bother me as much as preterism does, like full-blown preterism, 70 AD preterism. But to believe, you've got to ignore so much scripture to believe that we're in the kingdom. The only way you can do that is use an Oregon approach, not my ducks, but the Origen, the 3rd century guy that employed the allegorical method. But I think what you get there is that's where you see the rise of Mystery Babylon. I think it was already getting mixed in with truth in the 2nd century and the 3rd century with the early church fathers. But I think that's when you see the rise of Mystery Babylon. Mm-hmm. And Curtis and I were talking about this today as that vision. It is about prophecy, by the way, as John's looking at Mystery Babylon, he is astounded and amazed that he's like, Yeshua, these are your people. I don't even recognize this ecclesia anymore. It's not what you modeled. It's not what we practiced. It's not what we did. If he's looking in the 21st century and he's going, where's Passover? Where's Yom Teruah? Where's Feast of Tabernacles? Well, what happened is Mystery Babylon, Rome came in and mixed in a bunch of lies with truth. And we House of Israelites like to do that with Jeroboam. Jeroboam, his house would have been established forever, but no. He went and changed things up. He created his own priesthood. He created his own feast days. He created the 2 golden calves. And I'm sorry if there's any Catholic brothers.
He was the first seeker-sensitive pastor. Well, because he said, I'm going to put one here in Bethel and I'm going to put one here in Dan because it's too far for you to go all the way to Jerusalem. So I'm going to make it convenient to you. And And there was probably a whole, a Dan, you can go and stand there where the altar was, but there was probably a whole city there to serve the pilgrims, I guess, if you will.
So Brian Rivera asks, do you think Yeshua's words about the days of Noah and Lot are about a lack of awareness of judgment and life as usual, more so than, say, Nephilim presence and fallen angels? So the way I would answer that is, I really think it's both. I think the church historically has said it's only about lack of awareness and judgment and life as usual. And I think where the church at large has been really missing on this topic is that Nephilim are absolutely part of the equation. However, I don't think it's only about Nephilim. I think that, it's kind of all these things that lead to, right? So you wouldn't have Nephilim if the people living on the earth in those days had not found the seduction of the sons of God appealing, right? They're like, oh, this looks like fun. Let's do this. And then that led to this other thing, right? So I think the lack of morals or just the degradation of godly principles leads to the sons of God coming, and then you have the Nephilim. And I think that is essentially what we're seeing today. That's the trajectory that we're on anyway, right? So we haven't gotten there, but we're getting there.
Well, it's sort of like I've said this before about back to the comments about the kingdom. If the purpose of the church was to establish the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom that we see described in Scripture, then it is absolutely, you can be 100% dogmatic, is that the church has been a failure for almost 2,000 years. Total, complete failure on that. I mean, you can't even point to, what are you going to point to? Calvin's Geneva or something as an example of the kingdom that's been, you can't point to any place where it's been established at all, even in relatively homogeneous small communities.
Well, and look at it. Look, the Catholics, like they would maybe take over or conquer something, and then they would tell them, okay, you have to be baptized. You have to basically sort of say you believe in Jesus. Be baptized. You're now a Christian. Oh, but you can still worship your pagan gods. You can still do your pagan feast days. You can still do all these things, but now you're considered a Christian and a Catholic. And again, that's part of this mystery Babylon that grew in what we're calling the church. But I believe one of the most positive prophecy we're seeing now, not talking about the color of the Antichrist underwear or conspiracy theories, which a lot of them are true, but not talking about what they are doing. I'm looking right now at all the people all around the world. Curtis mentioned it today. A brother from Africa and some tribe sent him a coin that they had minted, and the whole tribe have now, like, it's like an awakening. They believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. They're celebrating his feast. They've got a coin with the ancient Aleph and the Tav with a lion and a crown on his head. And this is happening all over the world, that people are sort of leaving a lot of the traditions, if you will. And it's been slow, but it's speeding up. And I think that's what you're talking about, John, the convergence of events and the convergence of the craziness that we're seeing. We're also seeing this return to the faith handed down to the holy ones. And a lot of people going, well, wait a minute. God's very specific in how he wants to be worshiped and when he wants to be worshiped. He wants to be worshiped all the time, but he's very specific on when he wants his people to gather together. And I just think, due to Rome, as it was established and grew, and Constantine called Shabbat Jewish, he called the feast of the Lord, the feast of Yod, the feast of Jesus, that Jesus, as the Word, created on the fourth day. I view that as one of the most positive signs Now, if we can just stop talking about the shape of the earth and having calendar wars, we can differ on things, and because that is divisive. But God wants us to unite. It's about to get rough for us. We're going to need each other, and there's going to be some that we don't agree on everything. But guys, the ecclesia is going to have to come together and truly be one, as Jesus wanted us to be and told his disciples we should be one.
Amen. I think we have time for maybe one more question, since we were kind of focused a little bit on the days of Noah. This is a question from Fear of the Lord. What can you guys say about the return of Nephilim? So, well, I think we've more or less covered that in the show, but I definitely think that we are going to have a time in human history we're going to go back to hybrids, right? Nephilim are just hybrids. And I think that we are marching quickly toward that. And I saw that Peter DeSanctis wrote that it's like we're becoming the Borg, man and machine. I would agree with that. Again, if you guys are interested, I document all of that in Corrupting the Image Volume 3. The link is in the chat there if you want to check it out. And that should be coming out before the end of the month. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I think that's the direction we're going. Absolutely. So, gentlemen, any final thoughts?
I would just say too, the one thing that I've, everybody kind of gets their hammer, then everything in the world becomes a nail that they pound on. So I see this kingdom utopia desire on, if we could say, both sides of the political spectrum today. There's the NAR types who want to build the kingdom, and then there's the left who want to build their utopia. And at some point, and I think we ought to be concerned about both of them.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I do see, and I don't agree with everything these guys necessarily believe, but like E511, that's one of his shtick.
Right.
The false light, and then the patriots rising up against this evil. And I do believe that is a deception, and we saw it manifesting and playing out real time with the Q movement. You never saw Jesus mentioned. You saw a lot about the light, and you saw about being woke and waking up and kind of discovering and kind of seeing. A lot of people were starting to see that, wait a minute, this stuff about, certain people really, that control the money supply.
When you dig into some of them, they were talking about, we'll become light beings and into the fifth dimension, and just really bizarre stuff.
But yeah, E511 does that. I mean, he really, that's his shtick, and I think what's his name, on point preparedness. That's his the false light, to beware of the false light, and it falls into what we're seeing with the NAR. Like Chris, what's Lynn that we had on? That's one of her things. She is warning about the NAR movement, and they're talking about apostolic revelation and new revelation. And when people start believing there's new revelation and a new apostle says something, they're ripe for a deception. And that's my concern about that little part of Babylon. Because that's just Mystery Babylon too.
So those are our concluding remarks, Mr. Hamp, Dr. Hamp.
Thank you. Well, let me just thank you guys. It was a wonderful show. Thank you, everybody, for your fantastic questions. Now, again, we don't have all the answers. Nobody does, but the Bible does. And at the end of the day, what really matters is that we love God and we love our neighbor. Okay. And if we have different viewpoints about many different things, it's okay. God will straighten us all out when he comes back. And so just keep your eyes on him, love your neighbor, be kind to people, right? That's really what it's all about. And then the world will know that we're Christians, not because we believe such and such, but because we love one another, right? And that's how they're going to know. So I hope that resonates. Won't be here next week. I am taking a little vacation. So sorry, not next week, but the week after we'll be there. If you want to check out the book, it's in the chat, Corrupting the Image Volume 3. Till next time, God bless.